Imagine scrolling through your feed in early 2026, and bam, the Department of Justice drops over 3.5 million pages of Epstein files, packed with emails, videos, photos, and bombshell revelations that make your stomach turn. We're talking about a convicted sex offender who rubbed shoulders with presidents, billionaires, royals, and tech moguls, all while allegedly running the world's largest honeytrap operation. From Bill Clinton's contempt resolution in Congress to Prince Andrew's arrest and release under investigation, these files aren't just old news. They're reshaping everything from Wall Street boardrooms to the halls of power in Washington and beyond. In this video, we'll dive deep into how Jeffrey Epstein's web of influence, exposed in full force this year, is triggering resignations, lawsuits, and a total collapse of public trust in leaders. Did you know the files mention Russia nearly 10,000 times and Vladimir Putin over 1,000? Or that they outline blueprints for profiting off pandemics through offshore funds tied to Gates and JP Morgan? Stick around, because what started as a scandal in 2019 has evolved into a 2026 geopolitical earthquake, with UN experts calling it a global criminal enterprise that could qualify as crimes against humanity. We'll uncover the hooks that kept elites entangled, the fallout that's toppling empires, and why this could be the biggest trust buster since Watergate. If you're ready to see how one man's dark empire is forcing a reckoning on elite privilege, hit that like button now and let's unravel this together, because the truth is stranger and scarier than any conspiracy theory. As we kick off, remember, these aren't just documents, they're dynamite blowing up the facade of power. Epstein didn't just know powerful people, he allegedly collected kompromat on them for decades, turning influence into a weapon. Surveys show that after the releases, a majority of Americans say their trust in political and business leaders has plummeted, with many believing the powerful are rarely held accountable. And it's not just the US. From European royals to Asian Pacific ties, the ripple effects are global. We'll explore how banks are facing ultimate reputational risks, with survivors standing behind attorneys general demanding justice. But first, let's rewind to how Epstein built this shadow empire, from humble beginnings, scheming his way into the global elite through manipulation and dark alliances. Born in 1953 in Brooklyn, Epstein dropped out of college but landed a teaching gig at the prestigious Dalton School, where he charmed his way into connections with Wall Street titans like Bear Stearns' Alan Greenberg. From there, it was a rocket ride, managing billions for Les Wexner of Victoria's Secret fame, who allegedly gifted him that infamous New York mansion. But beneath the billionaire facade was a predator, convicted in 2008 for procuring minors, yet slapped with a sweetheart deal that let him work from jail. Fast forward to his 2019 arrest and mysterious death, ruled a suicide but fueling endless theories. Now, in 2026, with millions of files unredacted, we're seeing the full picture. A network involving CIA collaborations, Rothschilds, and even references to ancient deities in bank accounts. One ex-post calls it among the biggest geopolitical events since World War II. And honestly, they're not wrong. As trust in institutions craters, with polls showing lowered faith in US leaders, this exposure is igniting debates on systemic inequality. Epstein's network wasn't built on chance. It was a meticulously crafted web of power, seduction, and blackmail that snared the world's most influential figures. And the 2026 files lay it all bare like never before. Picture this: emails detailing potential meetings with Putin post-conviction, channels to the Kremlin, and Epstein boasting about Trump insights to Russian diplomats. That's over 1,000 mentions of Putin alone. But it goes deeper. Intelligence sources, including ex-MI6's Christopher Steele, label it very likely Epstein gathered kompromat for Russia over decades, with his sex empire dubbed the world's largest honeytrap, funneling leverage to Moscow. Poland's PM Donald Tusk even launched a probe, warning of Russian services co-organizing this pedophilia scandal, potentially leaving blackmail on Western leaders in FSB hands. And let's not forget Ghislaine Maxwell, his partner in crime, whose father, Robert Maxwell, had KGB ties, selling stolen promise software to them while working for Mossad and MI6, a familial espionage pipeline that likely drew Epstein in. The files exposed ties to Trump's inner circle, with new details on key members' entanglements, prompting PBS reports on how these revelations are rocking the administration. On the business side, names like Bill Gates appear in blueprints for a 20-year financial architecture turning pandemics into profit centers, offshore vaccine funds, pandemic reinsurance triggers, and donor-advised structures under charity covers, all running through Gates, JP Morgan, and Epstein years before COVID. Ex-users are buzzing, with one post noting elites' lust for a technocratic, surveillance-heavy global order, pushing CBDCs and digital IDs mirroring China's model. But it's not all geopolitics. Survivors' stories pierce through, with relatives backing Attorney General Pam Bondi in House hearings, demanding banks face the ultimate reputational risk. Reuters details ties to politicians and business titans, while NPR covers how conspiracy theories flourish amid unanswered questions. Even Wikipedia now describes the files as a collection detailing Epstein's activities, including his modest background descent via scheming. As resignations pile up, from Goldman Sachs' Kathy Rumler to Paul Weiss's Brad Karp, and arrests like Prince Andrew's hit headlines, the fallout is undeniable. Katie Couric's bulletin highlights worldwide leadership shakeups, while Axios reports ended careers across the globe. But how did these files finally see the light? That's where the real drama unfolds, with President Trump's 2024 campaign promise to release them turning into a 2026 transparency boast by AG Bondi, only for critics to call it underwhelming or a distraction. Yet, with Deputy AG Todd Blanche signaling this as the last major drop, the impact is anything but minor. As we peel back the layers, remember, this isn't just scandal. It's a system exposed, where a child predator moved among presidents and billionaires while victims waited for justice. The floodgates opened in late 2025 and crashed through 2026, with the Justice Department unleashing batch after batch of Epstein files, millions of pages that transformed whispers into roars, igniting a firestorm that's still burning bright. It started with Trump's election promise in 2024 to expose the deep state, but by December 2025, CNN reported 4 key takeaways from the latest drop: more unredacted names, evidence of withheld material, false claims in the archive, and hints at content too sensitive for public eyes. Then, January 2026 hit like a tsunami. NPR detailed how the releases fueled conspiracy theories, especially around Trump, while the New York Times explained the sheer scale: 3.5 million pages, thousands of images and videos, all conceding a system without accountability. By February, PBS aired segments on Maxwell pleading the Fifth before Congress, her silence amplifying the chaos as survivors demanded answers. Reuters unpacked Epstein's ties to politicians and titans, revealing communications that led to the Washington Post's coverage of resignations and investigations hitting prominent figures. Business Insider listed those facing covodes from reviles like Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, Strickle of Titles and Underprobe, to execs like Rumler and Karp dealing with headaches. The Harvard Ash Center podcast dissected the politics, noting shifting power dynamics as the saga revealed elite entanglements. Globally, Le Monde explored how Epstein built his protective network, using manipulation to access elites, while Facebook posts lamented the lack of accountability for the wealthy. In Asia Pacific, Kabar Asia reported a global reckoning with new arrests, corporate fallout, and anti-corruption measures reshaping ties. X threads exploded, with users like @Palthus calling it the biggest geopolitical event since WW2, citing CIA collabs, banks, Rothschilds, and ideological conspiracies. Even Bitcoin mentions. Miss Melchin highlighted elites' push for a new form of government, tying it to surveillance systems. Benji Leader exposed the Russian angle, debunking Mossad/CIA myths pushed by influencers like Tim Pool, who now gaslight audiences. Mr. Pool_QQ uncovered pandemic profit blueprints, while Highbrow_Nobrow framed it as a system exposure where authority evades accountability. UN experts, per @Fuse_News98511, deemed it a global criminal enterprise, meeting crimes against humanity thresholds. Ipsos polls showed Americans' trust tanking, with majorities feeling the powerful escape justice. Provoke Media listed it among 2025's crises, noting Trump as a reputational risk. As the file's underwhelming aspects, per BBC, clashed with MAGA's transparency claims, questions lingered. But the real eye-catcher? House Report 119-468, recommending contempt for former President Clinton, tying back to his Epstein associations. This release timeline isn't just history, it's a catalyst, flowing directly into the political carnage we're witnessing now. Hang on as we explore how these documents are toppling careers and igniting midterm tensions. Politics in 2026 is a battlefield scarred by Epstein's ghost, with the files acting as landmines, detonating careers and trust across party lines, creating a vacuum that's sucking in everything from midterm strategies to international relations. Start with the US. The Washington Post reports a wave of resignations and investigations, with figures stepping down amid scrutiny over Epstein communications. Think Clinton's contempt resolution, where House Report 119-468 blasts him for non-compliance, fueling partisan firestorms. Trump's inner circle isn't spared. PBS reveals close ties, with files detailing entanglements that have critics questioning the administration's transparency push. AG Pam Bondi's bold X statements on leading the most transparent era ring hollow to some, as BBC notes the release's underwhelming nature sparks MAGA defenses. But the impact? Polls from Ipsos show lowered trust in leaders, with many believing accountability is a myth for the elite. Globally, Katie Couric details arrests like Prince Andrew's, prompting leadership shakeups. British police nab him, only to release under investigation, costing his royal title. Poland's Tusk probes Russian involvement, warning of FSB-held blackmail on Western leaders. In Asia, Kabar Asia covers how documents trigger reckonings, with anti-corruption measures reshaping ties and voters demanding transparency on privilege. X buzzes with, @MyNews366, noting Washington tensions weaponized for midterms, distracting from infrastructure and climate. Diddy Docket shares Axios on ended careers worldwide, while @Palace predicts a trust collapse rivaling World War II's end. Russian ties dominate. Benji Leader's thread exposes 10,000 Russia mentions, Epstein's FSB contacts, and honeytraps via Russian models. Steele calls it kompromat for Moscow. This flips narratives. Influencers once blaming Mossad now dismiss as distractions. UN's Crimes Against Humanity label, per. Reuters elevates it to international courts. Business bleeds into politics. Gates' pandemic blueprints tie to WEF pipelines, fueling Ms. Melchin's take on elites craving technocratic orders with CBDCs and IDs. Maxwell's fifth plea on PBS amplifies fallout, as survivors push for justice. NPR's conspiracy coverage shows theories flourishing, unanswered questions breeding doubt. Harvard's podcast unpacks shifting dynamics, elite privilege debates igniting. As 2026 midterms loom, Khabar Asia warns sensationalism diverts from policy. Yet, this reckoning could realign voter priorities. The New York Times interactive lists fallout: arrests, firings, probes. From royals to ex-presidents, no one's safe. This political quake isn't isolated. It's seeping into business realms, where reputational risks are turning titans into targets. Let's pivot to how Wall Street and beyond are reeling. Business empires are crumbling under the weight of Epstein's files in 2026, with banks, tech giants, and conglomerates facing unprecedented reputational Armageddon as ties to the scandal force boardroom purges and stock plunges. American Banker warns of the ultimate reputational risk, with survivors and relatives backing AG Bondi in hearings, demanding accountability from institutions like JP Morgan, which handled Epstein's accounts despite red flags. The files reveal blueprints for profiting off pandemics, offshore funds, reinsurance triggers, and charity-veiled structures tied to Gates, JP Morgan, and Epstein, all predating COVID, as at Mr. Pool_QQ exposes in viral threads. Reuters details business titans' entanglements, with communications leading to resignations, like Goldman Sachs' Kathy Rumler and Paul Weiss's Brad Karp, per Business Insider. Provoke Media lists 2025 crises, pegging Trump as a corporate reputation hazard amid overdependence on figures now tainted. Globally, Axios reports ended careers, from U.S. execs to international moguls, as the scandal's reach exposes systemic complicity. Ex-user @Palace highlights banks and Rothschilds in the mix, predicting a trust collapse in global structures. @Ms. Melchin ties it to elites pushing surveillance-heavy orders, with WEF connections amplifying scrutiny on firms like Microsoft. The New York Times notes the archive's scale: millions of pages conceding false claims and withheld evidence, hitting stock values, as investors flee associated companies. In finance, Polygon and CoinGecko might show dips in crypto mentions from the files, but the real damage is intangible: lowered trust, per Ipsos, with Americans viewing leaders as unaccountable. Le Monde details Epstein's manipulation into elite circles, protecting his operations through business alliances. Wikipedia's entry on the files underscores emails and videos detailing activities, including procurement of young women, trafficking, a honeytrap that ensnared CEOs. Khabar Asia reports corporate fallout reshaping Asia-Pacific ties, with anti-corruption drives. Benji Leader exposes Russian kompromat pipelines affecting firms with Eastern exposure. As Maxwell pleads fifth on PBS, it spotlights enablers in business. UN's Crimes Against Humanity tag elevates risks, potentially leading to sanctions. Harvard's analysis shows shifting power, with elite privilege debates hurting brands. The Epstein files shockwaves in 2026 are redrawing global maps, with arrests, probes, and diplomatic strains exposing a borderless web of elite complicity that threatens international stability. Katie Couric reports high-profile arrests and resignations worldwide, from Prince Andrew's British ordeal, arrested, released, title stripped, to probes in Poland warning of Russian-orchestrated scandals. Le Monde unravels Epstein's global network, built from modest roots through scheming, opening doors to elites across continents. Khabar Asia details a reckoning in Asia-Pacific: new arrests, corporate fallout, and anti-corruption measures reshaping ties as voters decry privilege shaping justice. UN experts, via @Fuse_News 98511, assess the files as a global criminal enterprise, meeting crimes against humanity thresholds per Reuters and Al Jazeera, elevating it to the Hague potential. Russian ties dominate. Files with 10,000 Russia mentions. Putin's 1,000 plus FSB contacts and honeytraps, as at Benji leader details, flipping Western blame games. This kompromat, possibly in Moscow's hands, strains US-Russia relations amid midterm weaponization, per @MyNews366. European royals face scrutiny, with @Palace calling it post-WWII scale, involving Rothschilds and ideological conspiracies. In the Americas, Clinton's contempt ties to broader accountability pushes. African and Middle Eastern links emerge in documents, though less detailed, hinting at broader trafficking. Business crosses borders. Gates' pandemic profits blueprint via @Mr.Pool_QQ. Ties to WEF, fueling @Ms. Melchens. Critique of technocratic pushes like CBDCs mirroring China. Axios lists worldwide career ends, while Facebook laments no rules for the wealthy. Ipsos polls reflect global trust erosion, mirroring US drops. As Maxwell's fifth plea echoes on PBS, it amplifies calls for international tribunals. Harvard's podcast explores shifting dynamics, elite debates igniting. This global lens reveals not isolation, but interconnection, leading naturally to the conspiracy undercurrents bubbling beneath. The file's international fallout is just the tip. Deeper dives uncover shadowy alliances. Conspiracy theories aren't just fringe in 2026. The Epstein files have mainstreamed them, blending fact with speculation to paint a picture of hidden agendas from CIA collabs to Russian honey traps, eroding the very fabric of global trust. NPR covers how releases fuel theories, especially around Trump, with unanswered questions breeding doubt. @Palace's thread dubs it WWII scale, citing CIA, banks, Rothschilds, royals, politicians, moguls, celebrities, sacrifice deities and accounts, and Bitcoin, predicting total institutional collapse. Yet realism tempers, justice unlikely in a corrupted world, but exposure strikes a blow. Benji Leader debunks Mossad/CIA myths, exposing Russian kompromat via FSB, Putin meetings, and models. Influencers like Pool gaslighting to protect narratives. The file's 3.5 million pages concede false claims with held evidence, per New York Times, amplifying suspicions. @Mr.Pool_QQ reveals pandemic architecture, offshore funds, triggers, WEF, pipelines through Gates, JP Morgan, Epstein, pre-COVID designs. Ms. Melchen links to elite's new government lust, pushing surveillance akin to China. BBC notes underwhelming releases clashing with MAGA transparency, sparking misdirection claims. Wikipedia details the collection's partial release, including Maxwell's KGB-tied father. UN's crimes label adds gravity, as at Fuse_News 98511 reports. Kabar Asia warns of sensationalism distracting from policy. This mix of verified ties and gaps hooks viewers, flowing into current developments where 2026 sees fresh twists. The conspiracy veil lifts, revealing ongoing drama. As February 2026 unfolds, the Epstein saga surges with fresh developments, from Maxwell's congressional silence to mounting probes, keeping the world on edge as new layers peel back. PBS airs Fallout Growth with Maxwell pleading fifth, her reticence fueling speculation. Washington Post covers resignations waves, investigations hitting figures, post-communications reveal. Reuters updates on ties to politicians, titans. Business Insider lists consequences. Andrew, Rumler, Karp, headaches. Kabar Asia reports midterm weaponization, distracting priorities. At My News 366 notes global debate on privilege, calling for governance. At Diddy Docket shares Axios on global career ends. At Benji Letter's Russian expose trends, with 1,841 likes. At Highbrow_Nobrow frames system exposure. These real-time ripples, from trust polls to international calls, underscore the file's enduring punch. Now, looking ahead, what does the future hold post-Epstein files? In 2026, this could force transparency reforms, but without action, trust may never recover. A call for vigilance. If this video helped you, make sure to like it. It really supports the channel. Subscribe for more videos like this, and share it with someone who'd benefit. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.